Have you ever reached the point where you've done everything people told you to do? Worked harder, prayed longer, stayed patient, stayed positive, yet somehow your life refuses to move. It's one of the most painful experiences a person can face. You watch others succeed, while every door in front of you seems locked. You begin wondering if the universe has forgotten your name. But what if I told you that your greatest breakthrough doesn't begin with doing more? What if the very effort you're making is the invisible force keeping your blessings away? There is an ancient spiritual principle understood by mystics, philosophers, and successful people across generations. It reveals that when nothing is working, the answer is almost never outside of you. It's inside you. And once you understand this hidden law, life begins responding in ways that seem almost impossible to explain. Stay with me until the very end, because the final lesson may completely change the way you approach every challenge, every relationship, every opportunity, and every dream you have ever held in your heart. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and become part of a community dedicated to wisdom, inner transformation, and timeless spiritual principles. If this message reaches even one person at exactly the right moment, it could change an entire life. Now, take a deep breath, quiet your mind, and prepare to discover what to do when absolutely nothing is working. And watch what happens when the universe finally begins to respond. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that every single thing you've been struggling to fix is still exactly the same. The bills haven't disappeared. The relationship hasn't healed. The opportunity hasn't arrived. Your dreams still feel distant, and your heart still carries the same weight it carried yesterday. For many people, this isn't imagination, it's reality. They wake up every day hoping today will be different, only to end the day feeling more discouraged than before. Eventually, they begin asking questions that quietly echo through the human soul. Why is nothing changing? Why do some people seem to attract opportunities effortlessly, while others struggle endlessly? Why does it feel as though life responds to everyone else, but remains silent toward me? Most people answer these questions by working even harder. They push themselves beyond exhaustion. They chase more opportunities. They consume more motivational videos. They read another book. They repeat more affirmations. They force themselves to stay positive even when every emotion inside them feels broken. Yet strangely, despite all the effort, the resistance only grows stronger. It's like trying to open a door by pushing with all your strength, never realizing the door actually opens by pulling. The harder you push, the more convinced you become that the door is permanently locked. This is one of the greatest illusions of human life. We have been taught that effort alone creates results. While action certainly matters, action without inner alignment often creates friction instead of flow. Think about the times you've desperately wanted someone to like you. The more you tried to impress them, the more distant they became. Think about the nights you couldn't fall asleep because you desperately wanted to sleep. The harder you tried, the more awake you became. Think about searching everywhere for something you'd lost, only to find it the moment you stopped looking so intensely. Life quietly whispers the same lesson over and over again. Force creates resistance. Alignment creates movement. There was once a man named Daniel who believed success depended entirely on hard work. Every morning he woke before sunrise, worked 12 hours a day, answered emails late into the night, and constantly worried about falling behind. From the outside, he looked disciplined. Inside, however, he lived in permanent fear. Every decision came from anxiety rather than inspiration. Every opportunity felt like a test he might fail. Every conversation carried the hidden question, "What if I'm not enough?" He didn't realize that although his hands were building a future, his mind was constantly expecting failure. Months became years. Despite his relentless effort, promotions passed him by. Business deals collapsed at the last minute. Relationships ended unexpectedly. Friends began achieving goals he had dreamed about for decades. Each disappointment strengthened his belief that life was unfair. But the truth was something far more subtle. The universe wasn't punishing Daniel. It was reflecting Daniel. One evening, completely exhausted, he sat alone in his apartment, staring out the window, as rain tapped softly against the glass. For the first time in years, he stopped trying to solve his problems. He simply sat there in silence. No planning, no worrying, no chasing. Just stillness. In that quiet moment, a thought entered his mind unlike any thought he had ever experienced. What if nothing outside me needs to change first? At first he dismissed the idea. It sounded too simple, too unrealistic. But the question refused to leave him. What if the life I experience is constantly responding to the person I believe myself to be? That single question became the beginning of everything. Over the following weeks, Daniel made a decision that confused everyone around him. He stopped living every moment in survival mode. He still worked hard, but he no longer attached his identity to every outcome. Instead of beginning each morning by checking emails and worrying about problems, he spent 20 minutes sitting quietly, focusing on gratitude for things he already had. At first it felt pointless. Nothing outside changed immediately. But something inside began shifting. He noticed his breathing became calmer. Conversations felt easier. He smiled more naturally. He listened instead of constantly thinking about what might go wrong. Opportunities he previously ignored suddenly became visible. People responded differently to him. One client recommended him to another. A casual conversation at a coffee shop introduced him to someone who later became an important business partner. None of these events felt miraculous on their own. Yet together, they formed a pattern impossible to ignore. The external world had not suddenly become generous. Daniel had become receptive. This is where many people misunderstand spiritual wisdom. They imagine the universe as a giant machine that rewards positive thinking like magic. But life is often much more practical and profound than that. When your inner world shifts, your perception changes. When perception changes, your choices change. When your choices change, your relationships change. When relationships change, opportunities expand. And from the outside, it appears as though life itself has suddenly begun helping you. The ancient teachers understood this long before modern psychology began studying perception and cognitive patterns. They taught that reality mirrors consciousness. This doesn't mean every event is under your control. It means your state of being powerfully influences how you experience, interpret, and respond to whatever life presents. Imagine standing before two identical gardens. One person sees weeds, insects, and endless work. Another sees flowers waiting to bloom, birds singing, and peaceful beauty. The garden is exactly the same. Only consciousness is different. Yet, because consciousness is different, their actions become different. One neglects the garden, the other nurtures it. Months later, one garden flourishes while the other decays. The difference did not begin in the soil. It began in the mind. Perhaps this is why some people seem lucky. Not because life favors them, but because they unconsciously expect possibilities, where others expect disappointment. Their minds remain open instead of defensive. Their hearts stay available instead of guarded. They notice doors invisible to those consumed by fear. Fear has an extraordinary ability to narrow awareness. Imagine walking through a beautiful forest while convinced a dangerous animal is hiding behind every tree. Would you notice the sunrise filtering through the leaves? Would you hear the birds singing? Would you appreciate the fresh scent after rainfall? Probably not. Your nervous system would filter reality through survival. The beauty would still exist, but you wouldn't experience it. Many people unknowingly live this way every day. They expect rejection before speaking. They expect failure before trying. They expect disappointment before hoping. Then, when life reflects these expectations, they conclude they were simply being realistic. But realism without awareness often becomes self-fulfilling. This does not mean pretending problems don't exist. It means refusing to let problems become your identity. There is a profound difference between saying, "I am facing challenges," and saying, "My life will never change." One statement describes temporary circumstances. The other creates a permanent prison inside the mind. Every meaningful transformation throughout history began with someone seeing beyond present conditions. Explorers crossed oceans because they believed land existed beyond the horizon. Inventors built impossible machines because they imagined realities others could not yet see. Spiritual teachers transformed millions because they first transformed themselves. Nothing extraordinary ever begins with certainty. It begins with possibility. And possibility requires an inner space where hope is allowed to breathe. So if nothing seems to be working in your life today, perhaps the question isn't, "What else should I do?" Perhaps the deeper question is, "Who am I becoming while I wait?" Because the version of you that keeps fighting reality may never discover what the peaceful version of you is finally able to receive. Sometimes the universe isn't asking you to work harder. Sometimes it's asking you to become quieter. Sometimes it isn't delaying your blessing. It's preparing you to recognize it. And sometimes, the greatest miracle begins the moment you stop forcing life and start allowing life to meet you where your heart is finally at peace.